The wind howled through the empty highway, a cold and unforgiving gust that seemed to echo the pain of the abandoned dog. Its thin, weathered coat fluttered weakly against the harsh wind. Blood streaked across its fur from the injuries. The dog staggered across the asphalt, its movements slow and labored. Its eyes that once knew love, now held only confusion and fear. How had it gone from being adored to being discarded like trash on the side of the road? The car that had left it behind was long gone, but its presence was still felt in the dog's bones, its heart breaking with every strained breath. The dog whimpered softly, a faint cry for help that seemed lost in the vast empty road. For a moment, it stopped, lifting its nose to the sky, as if to call out to the wind, hoping someone would hear. But the silence was deafening. It was all alone now. The world was a hostile place. Every step forward felt like an eternity, but the dog pushed on, knowing that there had to be something beyond the cold and desolation. There had to be hope, somewhere. It just had to survive long enough to find it. The day seemed to drag on endlessly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The dog's steps were becoming slower, its body sagging more with each passing minute. It was tired in a way that no animal should ever feel. The world had been so different when it had lived with its family, when it had felt safe, loved. Now, all it had was the harsh road and the relentless wind. It looked around once again, hoping for some sign that it wasn't completely abandoned. There were no cars, no voices, just the echo of its own breath in the wind. The dog's paws ached, and it stumbled once more, its vision blurred by exhaustion. It thought of the good times, the walks, the games, the affection. Where had it all gone? Could it ever be that way again? But as the dog continued its journey, something inside it refused to give up. There had to be something more than this. Somewhere out there had to be love waiting for it, just as it had always waited for someone to love it. The dog's body was beginning to betray it, but its spirit refused to yield. It limped forward, each movement heavier than the last, but it kept going. Every step was a test, a fight against the overwhelming exhaustion that threatened to stop it. The pain in its side made it stumble, but it pushed through, lifting its head high as if hoping to see a distant figure on the horizon. Nothing. Just the endless stretch of the road. The world around it felt like a void, as if the dog was the only living creature left. But then the scent of something unfamiliar caught the dog's attention. It stopped, its ears perked as it sniffed the air, wondering if it had missed something, a source of hope, a potential savior. But the world around it remained unchanged. The air felt thick with the promise of something, but what? The dog continued walking, now more cautious. Its instincts told it to be alert, to find whatever it was that could save it from this nightmare. It was desperate, but it was also resolute. No matter how hopeless things seemed, it had survived this long. Maybe it could survive a little longer. Minutes felt like hours as the dog trudged on, its mind consumed by the emptiness. It had no idea where it was going, or what it hoped to find. The desperation in its eyes reflected a deep longing to be saved, but there was no one in sight. Each passing car ignored it, each person oblivious to the suffering of an animal left behind. In a moment of sheer exhaustion, the dog stumbled, falling to the side of the road. It lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on it. Thought of giving up crossed its mind, but something, a flicker of hope, a stubborn refusal to surrender, kept it going. It struggled to its feet once again, and as it did, its eyes caught sight of a small patch of greenery off to the side of the highway. A small oasis in the middle of the desert. It wasn't much, but it was something. The dog limped toward the patch of grass, praying that it would be safe enough to rest. It was its only chance for survival now. The dog dragged itself to the patch of grass, its legs trembling with every step. It collapsed onto the soft ground, grateful for the brief respite. The coolness of the earth beneath its paws was a small comfort in the endless heat. As the dog lay there, its eyes half closed, It thought back to the days when it had a home, when it had a family. The memory of the gentle hands that used to pet it, the sound of laughter as it played in the yard, felt like a distant dream. Was that life even real, or had it all been an illusion? It tried not to think of the past, but the pain of abandonment was too fresh. It had been left, thrown aside like a piece of trash. Yet here it was, still alive, still fighting. The dog's chest rose and fell slowly, as if savoring the moment of peace, but it knew it couldn't stay here forever. It had to keep going. Hope wasn't found in rest. It was found in movement, in the relentless will to survive. And so, the dog rose, pushing itself back onto its feet, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The dog had been wandering for what felt like an eternity. Its body was broken, its spirit frayed, but still, it trudged onward. The cruel truth was, it didn't know where it was going. The highway stretched endlessly, no sign of life in sight. Yet, as the days passed, the dog's resilience began to shine through. Each night it slept in a small abandoned nook by the side of the road, its dreams filled with memories of a time before, when it had a family. In its younger years, it had been adored, held close, treated as a companion. The images of those days danced in its mind. The soft touch of a hand, the sound of laughter, the warmth of a home. But now, all of that felt like a distant echo. The world was a harsh and unforgiving place. Yet, the dog refused to give in. There was something deep inside it, some primal instinct that kept it going. Maybe it wasn't just survival. It was the hope that someday someone would remember it. Someone would care. The dog couldn't stop moving, not yet. The road was long, but every turn seemed to bring the same emptiness. The dog found shelter for the night beneath a small cluster of trees, the leaves rustling softly in the wind. It was a poor refuge, but it was enough. As the cold night wrapped itself around the dog, it shivered, its thin coat offering little protection against the chill. For a moment, it allowed itself to rest, lying on the ground, its head tucked between its paws. The quiet was both comforting and unsettling. This solitude had become its reality. But as the dog lay there, it couldn't help but think of the family it had once belonged to. Had they thought of it, even once? Did they feel guilt for abandoning it? The dog had no answers, only an overwhelming sense of loss. Yet, deep inside, it still hoped. Maybe one day, it would be found. Maybe one day, someone would come and take it back to the place it once called home. Morning came without fanfare. The dog awoke stiff and sore from the cold, but it had survived the night. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The sky was still gray, a dull light breaking through the clouds as the dog slowly rose to its feet. There was no time to rest. There was always the next step to take. As the dog moved forward, its pace was slow, but deliberate. The highway stretched before it, just as it had the day before, and the day before that. The road was a constant companion, one that would either lead the dog to salvation or continue to push it toward an unknown fate. The dog didn't know which, but it had learned to keep moving, to never stop, to keep putting one paw in front of the other. It was all it could do now. The hope that once burned bright in its heart had dimmed, but it hadn't extinguished. And for now, that was enough. Days passed, and the dog's condition only worsened. It had been eating scraps from the side of the road, but its body was failing it. Each step felt heavier, each breath more labored. It had grown accustomed to the hunger, the thirst, the pain. But even then, it refused to give in. The instinct to survive had become its driving force, the only thing left that kept it moving forward. Yet, despite the harshness of the world, there were still moments that brought fleeting comfort. The gentle touch of a passerby, the smell of a distant meal cooking, or the brief warmth of the sun. These moments were brief, but they were enough to keep the dog going, to remind it that life, however difficult, still held small glimpses of kindness. It was these moments that gave it the strength to keep moving. Somewhere out there was still the possibility of rescue. Maybe it wasn't too late. It was nearing dusk when the dog stumbled upon a small park. The grass was damp from an earlier rain, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. The dog's legs shook as it walked through the park, its once vibrant coat now dull and matted. It was a place of rest, a fleeting moment of peace in the midst of its painful journey. The dog sat down under a large tree, its head lowered, as if in defeat. It had no strength left to continue. As the sun began to set, the sky painted in hues of purple and orange, the dog closed its eyes, breathing slowly. It was here in this quiet corner of the world that the dog allowed itself to hope once more. Perhaps tomorrow would bring a new beginning. Perhaps there would be someone who would finally see it, who would recognize the need for care, for love. For now, the dog could only wait, its heart heavy, but still full of that stubborn, unyielding hope. After days of wandering, the dog finally found itself at the gates of an animal shelter. It had stumbled upon it by accident, but there was no hesitation in its heart. The gate was slightly open, as if beckoning the dog in. The shelter was small, nestled between two old buildings, with a few trees swaying gently in the breeze. The dog's eyes narrowed as it peered inside, catching sight of other animals behind the chain-link fence. They looked well-fed, clean, and cared for. The dog hesitated, unsure if it would be welcomed here. After all, it had been abandoned once before, and trust was no longer something it could give so easily. But something deep inside told it to take the risk. Slowly, cautiously, it padded toward the gate. Its paws, worn and rough, scraped against the gravel as it moved forward. The smell of food wafted through the air, and for the first time in days, the dog felt a flicker of hope stir in its chest. Maybe, just maybe, this place could offer what it had been searching for. The dog entered the shelter hesitantly, its paws making a soft pattering sound as it walked through the gate. Inside, the atmosphere was different, quieter, more controlled. The other animals watched the new arrival with curious eyes. Some barked softly, others remained silent, observing from their kennels. The air was filled with a mix of smells: food, clean bedding, and something more comforting, like safety. The dog walked slowly through the shelter, each step a little more confident. A kind-hearted shelter worker, Emily, noticed the dog immediately. She had seen many animals come and go, but there was something about this one, a look in its eyes that spoke of a life much harder than most. Emily knelt down, extending her hand gently, not wanting to scare the dog. The dog paused, its eyes narrowing in cautious appraisal. It took a tentative step toward Emily, its body stiff, unsure whether to trust. But there was something in her presence, something familiar, that made the dog take a second step, then a third, until it was standing at her side. Emily gently ran her fingers through the dog's matted fur, her touch tender and reassuring. She could feel the dog's body stiffen at first, but gradually it relaxed. It seemed to realize that this wasn't a threat. There was kindness in Emily's touch, and slowly, the dog began to trust. She spoke softly to it, words of comfort, even though she wasn't sure the dog understood. "You're safe now," she whispered, more to herself than the dog. It was then that Emily noticed the scars on the dog's side, the marks of a past life that had been cruel and unforgiving. Her heart ached at the sight, but she pushed the sorrow aside. The dog needed care, and that was what she would give it. She helped the dog settle into a clean kennel, offering it food and water. The dog ate slowly, almost cautiously, as if it wasn't sure when it would be allowed to finish. Emily sat beside it, her eyes soft with understanding. It would take time, but she knew the dog would heal. And, just maybe, it would learn to trust again. Days passed, and the dog began to heal, both physically and emotionally. Emily cared for it every day, feeding it, bathing it, and giving it the love it so desperately needed. The dog's coat slowly grew shinier, its gait less stiff. It had become more comfortable in the shelter, its eyes showing less fear and more curiosity. The other animals in the shelter, who had once seemed like distant strangers, were now companions. They would bark playfully from their kennels as the dog walked past, offering soft greetings. Though it was still uncertain of its place in this new world, the dog had begun to show signs of joy. It would wag its tail when Emily approached, its eyes lighting up at the sound of her voice. One evening, as Emily sat on a bench near the shelter's yard, the dog trotted over to her and sat down beside her. For the first time in a long while, it leaned against her, seeking comfort, seeking connection. Emily smiled, her heart swelling. She knew this was only the beginning of the dog's journey, but it was a start that was filled with the promise of healing and, perhaps, a new life. As the days turned into weeks, the dog grew stronger. It had begun to trust again, to open up to the world in ways it hadn't done in a long time. One morning, Emily took the dog out for a walk around the shelter. The dog walked beside her, its pace steady and confident. The other animals watched from their kennels as the dog passed, some wagging their tails, others simply observing. For the first time since its arrival, the dog seemed to understand that this was a place of refuge, a place where it could heal. It wasn't the same as its old home, but it was a new beginning. As they walked along the path, Emily stopped and turned to the dog, her heart full of hope. "You've come so far," she said, her voice filled with pride. The dog looked up at her, its eyes soft and trusting. In that moment, Emily knew that this was only the beginning of the dog's journey, not just to recovery, but to finding a place where it truly belonged. Emily was in the shelter's office when she discovered the dog's microchip. The scan beeped, revealing the dog's past, its former family. She stared at the screen, stunned. They were not just any family, they were the ones who had abandoned it. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. How could they have left this loyal animal behind? The dog, oblivious to the past, lay curled up in its kennel, waiting for its next meal. Emily's heart broke, but she couldn't give up on the dog. She had to find them. They needed to face the truth and see the consequences of their actions. The dog deserved better than this. It deserved to know love again, but that would only happen if she could reunite it with the family that had left it in the cold. With a sigh, Emily made the call, not knowing how it would end, but determined to give the dog the closure it needed. The family was located quickly, but when they were contacted, their response was not what Emily expected. They seemed indifferent, almost dismissive. "We don't want it back," the woman on the phone said coldly. "It's just a dog." Emily's heart sank. She tried to explain how much the dog had suffered, how it was slowly healing, but the woman wasn't interested. She hung up without a word of apology, leaving Emily with nothing but silence. The dog had been abandoned for no reason other than their convenience. It wasn't just a dog, it was a living being that had trusted them. The anger inside Emily built, but she refused to let it cloud her judgment. She had to keep fighting for the dog. The family had turned their back, but Emily wouldn't do the same. The dog had already been let down once. Now, Emily would be its advocate. The phone call had been a painful reminder of the cruelty the dog had faced, but it also fueled Emily's resolve. The shelter workers began to notice the change in her. She was no longer just caring for the dog, she was fighting for it. Emily spent the next few days researching the dog's history, trying to find any way to track down the family or gain insight into why they had abandoned it. The dog, unaware of the turmoil, had become more trusting. It greeted Emily at the door each morning, its tail wagging, its eyes bright. In those small moments, Emily saw hope. The dog wasn't defined by its past, it was defined by the love it was now receiving. Emily refused to let that hope die. She had to keep going. If she could find the family, she would get answers. If not, the dog would find a new family, one that would never abandon it. Emily finally managed to track down the family through social media. The revelation was like peeling back a layer of a painful truth. They weren't just negligent, they were dismissive, refusing to acknowledge the hurt they had caused. Emily sent one last message, explaining the dog's journey and how far it had come. She demanded that they take responsibility. As she hit send, the dog was lying at her feet, its body relaxed in a moment of peace. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the dog deserved more than what the family could offer. She had already begun the process of adopting it, knowing that it had found a place in her heart. The dog had been abandoned once, but it had found something better, a future filled with love. Emily's hands trembled as she looked down at the dog. She wasn't just fighting for its past, she was fighting for its future. The family never responded. Emily, though disappointed, was resolute. She had done all she could. The dog's past no longer mattered as much as its future. Emily took the necessary steps, signing adoption papers and preparing for the dog's new life with her. As she led the dog out of the shelter, the weight of the past seemed to lift. The dog walked confidently by her side, its eyes bright with the promise of a new home. They left the shelter together, ready to start a new chapter. Emily smiled down at the dog, knowing that no matter what had happened before, this was where it belonged now. They had found each other, and that was all that mattered. The dog's journey was far from over, but for the first time it felt like it was heading in the right direction. The day had come. Emily had made the decision. The dog, once abandoned, was now ready to face its past. It had been a long road, but they had reached the crossroads, where the dog had to confront its former family. Emily led the dog to the house, her heart pounding in her chest. The family had agreed to meet, though Emily knew they wouldn't be as welcoming as she hoped. As they stood at the door, the dog seemed uneasy, as if it knew this moment was crucial. The once hopeful eyes now showed a flicker of doubt. Emily knelt beside the dog, her voice soft but firm. "You're not alone anymore. We've made it this far together," she whispered. The dog wagged its tail, still unsure of what was to come. Emily opened the door, her hand gently on the dog's back, leading it into the uncertain future. They were about to meet the family that had turned their back on the dog, but no matter the outcome, Emily knew one thing for sure: the dog had a new family now. Inside the house, the reunion was far from what Emily had imagined. The family barely acknowledged the dog, as if it was a stranger returning after a long absence. The woman who had abandoned it stood with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. The dog hesitated at the threshold, looking up at Emily for reassurance. Emily could feel the weight of the dog's past bearing down on her, but she stood firm. "This dog deserves more than you gave it," she said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. The family members exchanged looks but remained silent. The dog, despite the cold reception, moved forward, approaching the woman cautiously. It sniffed her, its tail low, unsure of the reception it would receive. The dog's eyes met hers, searching for something, anything. But there was nothing in the woman's gaze. Slowly, the dog turned back to Emily, who knelt beside it, offering the comfort of a soft, understanding touch. It was clear, this reunion wasn't for healing, it was for closure. The visit didn't end with the closure Emily hoped for. The family offered no apology, no recognition of the dog's pain. As Emily led the dog back to the car, the dog looked back at the house, its eyes filled with a kind of understanding. It didn't belong there anymore. The dog's tail drooped, but as Emily opened the car door, it hopped in without hesitation, settling into the seat as if it had already chosen its place. It was a bittersweet moment, but Emily knew that this chapter had to close. The family couldn't heal the wounds they had caused, but Emily could offer something they never had: the chance to be loved, cared for, and protected. As the car pulled away from the house, the dog rested its head on Emily's lap. And for the first time, it seemed at peace. There were no more questions, no more pain. It was time to look forward. Back at the shelter, Emily could see the transformation in the dog. It was no longer the frightened, wary creature that had wandered into her life months ago. It was now confident, its coat shiny, and its eyes filled with trust. The shelter had been its first step toward healing, but now, it had found its true home. Emily spent her days with the dog, taking it for walks, playing in the yard, and offering it the love it had always deserved. The dog had found its place, not in the past with a family that didn't care, but in a future with Emily, where it was valued. Each day, the dog grew stronger, its fears slowly fading into the background. It was a story of redemption, not just for the dog, but for Emily as well. She had rescued it from the streets, but in return, It had rescued her from the loneliness that had shadowed her life. They were no longer two strangers bound by circumstance, they were family. It wasn't long before Emily made the final decision. The dog would stay with her forever. She officially adopted it, signing the papers that would bind them together. No longer would the dog face the uncertainty of abandonment. No longer would it feel alone. The dog, now named Buddy, stood proudly by Emily's side as she finalized the adoption. There was no grand ceremony, no fanfare, just the quiet understanding between two souls who had found each other when they needed it most. Emily leaned down, giving Buddy a soft kiss on the head. "Welcome home," she whispered. As they walked out of the shelter, hand in paw, Emily knew this was the beginning of a new life. The dog had come from pain, but it had found joy, trust, and most importantly, belonging. The days were peaceful now. Buddy had settled into his new life with Emily, and the bond between them grew stronger each day. The once wary dog had transformed into a playful, confident companion. Their morning walks had become a cherished ritual, with Buddy trotting beside Emily, his tail wagging enthusiastically. The world felt brighter, the sky clearer, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt truly at peace. Buddy, too, seemed at ease. He no longer flinched at loud noises or sudden movements. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, a testament to his healing. Emily smiled as she watched him chase after a ball, his joy evident in every playful leap. It was a small moment, but it was everything. Buddy had found his place, and so had she. They had both healed, finding comfort and love in each other. The bond they shared now was a quiet promise. No matter what had happened before, they would never be alone again. One afternoon, Emily took Buddy to the park, a place they had visited often. The park was lively, filled with families, children running, and other dogs playing. Buddy hesitated at first, his paws slowing as they entered the busy area. He wasn't used to such chaos, but Emily encouraged him with a gentle voice. Slowly, Buddy's anxiety faded as he watched the other dogs play. He took a few steps forward, then another, until he was running alongside them. Emily's heart swelled with pride as she watched Buddy integrate into the world he had once feared. He had found his confidence, his place among the other dogs. Emily sat on a bench, her eyes fixed on Buddy as he played. For the first time she could see the dog that he was meant to be, free, happy, and full of life. As the months passed, Emily's life became increasingly entwined with Buddy's. They shared everything, the quiet mornings, the evening walks, and the simple, everyday moments that made up their life. The bond they shared was deeper than anything Emily had ever known. The dog had become her protector, her companion, and her best friend. In return, Emily had given Buddy everything he had lost: love, stability, and a forever home. On a chilly evening as they sat together on the couch, Buddy's head resting on Emily's lap, she realized just how much their lives had changed. It wasn't just about healing, it was about growing together. The dog had taught her to appreciate the small moments, to find joy in the quiet, and to trust again. Emily stroked Buddy's fur, her heart full of gratitude. They had come so far, but the road ahead was bright. They were no longer just surviving, they were thriving. It was a quiet evening when Emily received a phone call that would change everything. It was from the animal shelter where Buddy had once stayed. They had a new dog, a younger pup in need of a home. Emily's heart swelled as she thought of Buddy's journey, knowing that this was an opportunity for another animal to find the same love and safety. With Buddy by her side, Emily made the decision to adopt again. The shelter worker told her the pup had been through a lot, much like Buddy had. Emily looked at Buddy, his eyes soft and trusting, and knew that he would understand. He had once been the one needing a second chance, and now it was his turn to give back. Together they would welcome the new pup into their home and help it heal, just as Emily and Buddy had healed together. Bringing the new puppy home was a moment of quiet joy. Buddy sniffed the pup, unsure at first, but then gently nuzzled it, offering comfort. Emily watched as Buddy began to show the pup the ropes, guiding it with patience and understanding. The pup, once anxious and timid, slowly started to relax, sensing the love and security around it. Emily knew this was the start of a new chapter, not just for the pup, but for Buddy as well. Together, they would heal, grow, and become a family. As they lay together that night, Buddy's body pressed against the new pup, and Emily's heart was full. The dog she had saved had become the savior of another. They were no longer just individuals, they were a family, a unit bound by love, trust, and the shared understanding of what it meant to be truly home. As Emily and Buddy continued their daily walks, the bond between them only deepened. Buddy, once a frightened dog with no place to call home, now walked with confidence beside her. He had healed, and so had Emily. Their routine had become a comforting constant, a reminder that no matter what happened in the past, they had each other. The morning air was crisp as they strolled through their neighborhood. The trees had begun to change colors, painting the world with hues of amber and gold. Buddy's fur shone in the sunlight, and his movements were graceful, full of life. Emily smiled as she watched him sniff the ground, his tail wagging happily. He had found peace. They had both found peace. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known before. It wasn't just about rescuing Buddy, it was about saving each other. And as they walked, side by side, Emily knew that this was exactly where they were meant to be. One afternoon, as they wandered through a nearby park, Emily paused to sit on a bench, taking in the quiet beauty of the moment. Buddy lay down at her feet, his body stretched out, content. The world around them buzzed with life, children playing, people jogging, the sounds of laughter filling the air, but in that moment, everything felt still. Emily reflected on how far they had both come. Buddy's transformation from a scared, abandoned dog to the joyful companion he was now was nothing short of a miracle. And Emily's own journey, from loneliness and heartache to finding love and connection again, had been just as profound. They had given each other something irreplaceable, the power to heal. As she sat on the bench, Buddy resting beside her, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. No matter the challenges they had faced, they had always found their way back to each other, stronger and more united. The seasons had changed, and with the arrival of winter, Emily and Buddy continued their walks, bundled up against the cold. The snow had begun to fall, coating the world in a soft, quiet blanket of white. Despite the chill in the air, Emily felt warm as she looked down at Buddy, his nose dusted with snow, his tail wagging excitedly as he bounded through the snowflakes. He had always loved the snow, and Emily couldn't help but laugh at the sight of him jumping and playing. It reminded her of how far they had come, of all the challenges they had faced together. And yet, here they were, stronger than ever. As they walked through the snowy streets, Emily's heart swelled with love for Buddy. He had found a place in her life, and she had found a home in his heart. The cold air only seemed to make their connection stronger, as if the winter was just another part of the journey they would face together. One evening, as the sun set and the sky was painted in hues of pink and purple, Emily sat on the porch with Buddy curled up beside her. The world was quiet, the air cool, but not cold. It had been a long day, but in this moment, everything felt right. Buddy had grown into a confident, loving dog, and Emily had grown alongside him. She thought back to the day they had met, to the dog that had wandered the streets with no one to care for him. It seemed like a lifetime ago. But now they had found each other, and they were home. Emily reached down to scratch Buddy's ear, feeling the warmth of his body next to hers. "We've come a long way," she whispered softly. Buddy looked up at her, his eyes filled with trust and affection. Emily smiled, knowing that no matter what came next, they would face it together, as a family. As the years passed, Emily and Buddy's bond only deepened. They had become inseparable, sharing every moment of life's journey. They had both found something in each other, a sense of purpose, a love that transcended words. Buddy had been Emily's savior, and she had been his. Their lives were no longer defined by the pain of the past, but by the love and trust they had built together. One afternoon, as they walked down a familiar path, Emily stopped to take in the view. The field stretching out before them, the sky a bright blue canvas. She looked down at Buddy, His ears perked as he sniffed the air. They had both come so far, and Emily knew that this was the beginning of forever. No matter where life took them, they would always have each other. As they walked side by side, Emily whispered, "Thank you, buddy," knowing that he would always be by her side, her loyal companion, her family.